Welcome. Surprise stream. We're doing The Crow. We're going to talk about The Crow today because, of course, the trailer just dropped for the Skarsgård version of The Crow, and it's got a lot of people all tied up in a knot. And I just want to discuss it a little bit before the movie comes out and it starts getting compared to the Brandon Lee film and all this kind of stuff. And of course, I've read at least a third of the comic. The comic is the original comic that the Crow, the Brandon Lee version was based on. Was only a three-part series, um, and it looks like the Skarsgård version of the Crow will be based off of the same three-part series, and it's going to be an interesting thing. It's going to be an interesting time. Um, so of course, like everybody, I did see that they are going to be quote unquote reimagining The Crow for a modern audience or whatever, and I don't I don't necessarily know what that means. At the same time, the story looks to be pretty much the same in that Eric Draven and Shelley are murdered by a gang of in the book it was just basically general crackheads and gangbangers. And then, of course, Eric is resurrected to get revenge. That seems to be a very basic premise, and it seems to be that's the direction that they're going in. But you never can tell when it comes to Hollywood. Hollywood has a way of just doing what they feel like with properties. Now, The Crow as a property is not exactly well taken care of. Let's uh, let's put it like that. People don't necessarily take The Crow seriously. And what I mean by that is that the character is is not really well protected. I believe John Obar sold his stock in The Crow years ago, and basically there's been various other writers picking it up, doing whatever they wanted with it for the past 30 some odd years. I'm not sure. I used to have a giant compendium of most of the '90s Crow comics, which is included the original series. Then it was the Crow, City of Angels, and then we started going into a lot of different kinds of crows, like the Native American crow and the crow being female. The most recent one I have read was the crow as a little boy or something like that was killed by a Catholic priest, who was, of course, molesting children. And he ended up getting killed by another crow, which ended up being a girl, who I guess the boy had raped when he was alive. It was ridiculous. So I stopped reading the comics. So that one kind of blew my head off because you're not supposed to be able to kill this thing. Um, and the Crow is a very simple story. You don't really get 5 issues out of the Crow. You get usually you can wrap everything up in 2 or 3. You get the inciting incident where you introduce the protagonist. The protagonist cares about something, whether it's themselves or their environment or a loved one or whatever the case may be. And then everything is taken away from him. He's killed. In the next issue, the crow is resurrected, and he finds out that he's the crow. They don't really go over the mythology too much. Sometimes they go into the mythology a little bit more than others. People have built upon it, of course, over time. And then you get into the vengeance, where basically the crow is a zombie. It's a zombie-like monster. It's not a monster, I guess you could say. It's a human being that's been brought back to life through magic. And you're not supposed to be able to kill the crow. You can't harm it. You can't stop it. It's just pure vengeance. Um, and so you're not looking at the crow to be put in a situation where the crow is going to be in danger of being killed or destroyed. But basically, how are the villains going to stave the crow off and eventually be consumed by death? And it's a great symbol, the crow, for death, because death is inevitable. and the Crow is essentially a Grim Reaper. He just can't be stopped. So it's a very, when done correctly, the Crow is a great character dynamic when it's done correctly. Um, so the original series, of course, is a musician by the name of Eric Draven. Him and his girlfriend Shelley are driving along. It's set in Detroit, which I believe is where John Obar is from, or James Obar, I'm sorry, where he's from. And um, they are attacked by, gangbangers, general crackheads, or whatever. Shelley is raped and killed, and Eric is raped. He's not raped and killed. He's just murdered. But he's basically forced to watch, and that makes his soul restless, knowing that Shelley was defiled and destroyed in such a way. And of course, he comes back for vengeance. And it doesn't really matter who the villains are; they're not very well fleshed out because, really, who cares? It's just like a regular gang of misfits or whatever. So the Brandon Lee version of the movie, of course, is a classic, cult classic. Not just because Brandon Lee gave his life for that movie to be given life, but because it is a very simple movie, um, about revenge and vengeance, and it shows you that Eric Draven was really a good guy, and he, of course, gets some attachments on Earth, like, the girl Sherry and some of the other people that he comes across. That, well, you want him to stick around, um, but as usual, the Crow, once the mission is complete, the Crow goes away. He finds peace and he dies off. Um, there have been other iterations of this, of people trying to deny the Crow peace, which is, villains running away, or sometimes they will do something slick, like the villain will grow up to be somebody better when the Crow returns. They'll be a better person or something like that. There's always, these little wrinkles that they do to try to make things a little bit more interesting. But ultimately, the Crow can't rest until vengeance is done. Um, so in the movie, of course, we know that Eric is revived, and he just goes on a spree of stylishly murdering the guys who attacked um, attacked him and his girlfriend. AJ3, what's up? Did you see the sequels of The Crow after the original? I probably did not. Again, I probably read the comics that they were based on. I know City of Angels is one of the sequels. I've read City of Angels. City of Angels is kind of nutty, um, but I don't remember if I watched the movie or not. Maybe I'll watch the movie again to remind myself whether I've seen it or not. But I don't. I'm pretty sure I didn't. I know this is the fifth movie in the franchise, and I have not seen five Crow movies. I can tell you that much. I've probably seen the first two, but I certainly have not seen five. Uh, and I know that they have to be lower quality because nobody talks about them. I know they've been doing straight to DVD movies, but it's just like the comics. I mean, The Crow as a franchise just came out swinging. It came out in like the late '80s, so it's very '80s in terms of the hairstyles and um, the art style and all this kind of stuff. It's very grunge, very hair bandy. Um, it's awesome though. It's amazing. A lot of amazing stuff came out of the '80s and comics that they're trying to reboot today. Another one was Grendel, that was supposed to be rebooted it's supposed to be a TV show that comes out on Netflix, which led to Matt Wagner. I'm messing everybody's name up. Matt Wagner writing an entire new Hunter Rose book, Devil by the Deed. It's what do you call it? The Master's Edition of Devil by the Deed, which began so that he can sell it alongside of the new TV show or movie or whatever Grendel was supposed to be, but it never came out. But the Devil by the Deed book did, and I love that book. I love the original Grendel. I don't necessarily like the franchise after that. I mean, Devil's Legacy is okay, but um, Hunter Rose as the Grendel, Devil by the Deed, and everything that involves Hunter Rose is amazing. And similarly, The Crow is the same way. The first book of The Crow is a classic, and everybody who likes comics should just read it. I cannot stand up for City of Angels or anything else because a lot of that stuff is a blur. I know when IDW got the franchise, they started doing weird shit with it. Um, some of it was okay. I probably have a recent Crow series from IDW in a box somewhere in my closet. So maybe maybe I should have went through my closet and looked, but it's not relevant to the movie at all. The movie is going to be based off of Eric Draven. So from what I've seen, I saw the trailer of the movie. I saw some responses and people saying like, "Oh my God, this man, Skarsgård, he is entirely too skinny. He's a twink. What's this?" I hate to break it to you guys, but Eric Draven is a musician. He is a twink. He's ripped in the comics. You know, he's very well built in the comics, but he's also a very effeminate in the comics too. He's a guy who reads and writes poetry because he's a musician. So he reads and writes poetry. He's obsessed with Shelley. He's obsessed with death. And if you ever read the comics, you'll see him do weird things to himself. Like he's always cutting at his own body. He injects drugs into his own heart. Even he can't be hurt. That's the point. But he's showing this, that he cannot be hurt, that he's beyond death, he's beyond life by carving things into his own flesh and doing weird stuff to himself. But he's also showing somewhat of a, I guess you want to say, survivor's guilt, where he feels terrible for what happened to Shelley and that his inability to protect her. And the character is not, he's not Rambo. Like this is not Rambo turn, being played by John Oliver here. So the idea that the Crow is maybe too skinny and not as muscular is like, he's not like a kung fu master. He's a damn musician who gets murdered. So it's really not that much to it. Uh, and he is very twinkish. If the comic had come out today, let's say, a lot of people would say that it was, we wouldn't say it was SJW. They would probably just not get into it because it is very emotional. James O'Barr's girlfriend had passed away, which is what the impetus was for him to create The Crow. He was working out his own grief on the comic page, which is why there has been nothing that could touch the original series anyway, is because he was personally working through the grief of his girlfriend's passing. And I believe she died in a car accident. I don't think she died violently. But to give people who have never read The Crow a sense of what kind of language and what kind of person James O'Barr and The Crow is, he actually wrote a poem that was printed in the series. It says, "Here are the young men, a weight on their shoulders. Here are the young men, have they been? We knocked on all the doors of hell's darker chambers, pushed to the limits. We dragged ourselves in, watched from the wings. The scenes were replaying. We saw ourselves now. We never had seen portrayal of the traumas and degeneration, the sorrows we suffered and never freed, and never were freed. Where have they been? Weary inside, now our hearts lost forever, can't replace the fear or the thrill of the chase. These rituals showed up the door for our wanderings, opened and shut, then slammed in our face. Where have they been?" That one's called Decades. So there's a lot of poetry in here where, again, you can see that through the art, he is telling the story and yet also working through his grief. And Eric is a pretty cool character, but he says weird things. Like here, he's talking to um, one of the guys who helped kill him and Shelley, and he says, "I am he who can dissolve the terror of being a man and going among the dead. I am morphine for a wooden leg." So you see that he's speaking in rhyme to a degree, and morphine for a wooden leg. It wouldn't work for a wooden leg. Is that right? Um, and the book is full of just weird stuff like this, man. It's an excellent comic, even though I only physically have the third volume. I mean, the third issue. I ordered the entire book already. I'm just waiting for it to come in because I wanted to go through it all, but I couldn't wait. So I just said, forget it. Let's do it now. We got a sense of everything at this point. So Eric is the kind of person who just says like a lot of oddball things to people. Um, and he speaks very poetically, and you get a sense that he is divine justice. That's the goal here. It's not expressly religious in nature of the Crow, because it is a hyper violent comic where Eric is shooting through the wall and blowing people's heads off and just walking around murdering guys. Just crazy murder too. Just incredible murders and forcing people to commit suicide and all these things. Um, so if the movie, and going back to the trailer, I guess you could see, uh, it seemed to capture a lot of the elements of of the Crow in terms of what I saw. It looks like a more modern world, and from what I read of the synopsis, they're going to change the origin story to make Shelley more important. Um, it is mainly because of their absolutely garbage mentality that, uh, which I'm surprised they didn't gender swap this thing, if we're being honest. But they probably felt like Shelley was fridged. Now, a lot of you don't know what fridging is. Maybe you don't care. It was a concept created by Gail Simone of DC Comics that, women in comics only exist to be killed to motivate the men. And that has led to not only a lot of the gender swapping in terms of now we're flipping um, the characters so the man is getting killed so the women can avenge them, or they're putting the man in danger, as you've probably seen in like Wonder Woman and stuff like this. But it has led them to doing things like sparing women or having women save themselves in these situations. So to prevent fridging, and Shelley is a classically fridged character. You know, her death is the impetus for Eric coming back. He's not coming back really to avenge himself, which is one of the things that people should really get from the Crow, is that the Crow doesn't necessarily come back to avenge himself. Sometimes he can, but in Eric's situation, he's come back to mostly avenge Shelley. It's not really about him. So the character and the story is you change it dramatically if you take out the fridging element. If you say, well, we can't kill Shelley, or Shelley is going to be the one that comes back, well, then you created an entirely new story. So it seems like they are going to keep Eric, which is a thumbs up, but they've changed Shelley's origin a little bit. Apparently, she's going to be a part of the gang, a former member of the gang, or something to that effect, who ran off with Eric, and they're going to chase her down and kill her. Um, I would have to see that actually happen to see how well it's done. But I'm not against what I saw in the trailer. I didn't hate the trailer. I said all that to say that. I didn't hate the trailer. I didn't think that the trailer was the worst movie trailer I've ever seen. Now, I'm pretty sure that the movie comes out in June. It's only April. We'll probably end up revisiting this again as I go through the entire story and watch the movies and everything. So probably I should just put let's discuss the Crow Part One, because there probably will be a Part Two once I watch the movies again. I want to watch the other movies too, and maybe I'll spend some time over the next couple of weeks watching the subsequent movies. But in any event, as far as I'm looking at it right now, I don't have a problem with the trailer. Um, I just didn't see what everybody's problem was. I know that they said he looks too much like the Joker, Jared Leto's Joker, and I do agree with that. Uh, but I think that the Crow, having having been a franchise that hasn't really been touched in a long time, people need to be re-educated about what it is and what it means. But I think the classic look is important, and it should have been adopted. And maybe they will adopt the classic look, but he does look a lot like Jared Leto's Joker, and it was eh, it is what it is. Am I saying Jared Leto, or I'm talking about the other guy? There's another guy that played the Joker recently too, and it looked like that. Did I watch the TV show Stairway to Heaven? What, is that a Crow TV show? Because I certainly did not. Again, the only Crow media that I care about is the original comics, the original 3-part series, and that Brandon Lee movie. Those two things go hand in hand. I have read the other comic books, but I don't remember them. If I have watched the TV show, I probably don't remember it. If I watched any of the other movies, I probably don't remember. I know a lot of this stuff goes hand in hand, but I'm a fan of the franchise, but I'm more a fan of the beginning of the franchise before it was taken and bastardized. Because the Crow can be literally anybody and literally anything. Um, because that's the nature of the world. Uh, Eric Draven is just the first Crow. He is not, the only one. And when he's done completing his mission, he goes back to the grave and another Crow is created in another situation. So that gives you a really good jumping on and jumping off point, because if you like the plot of what's going on with the Crow, you could just jump on and read that version of the Crow, and then you're not locked into reading any other version of the Crow. Um, so that makes it easy to get in and get out, but it also makes it easy for people to come in and fuck with things. And I've seen people do a lot of crazy stuff with the Crow. That's not saying that it's all bad. Some of it's good. Sometimes I think they did like a samurai version of the Crow or something like that, or it was like a Chinese version or something. Um, I think that's the last one I read was like an Asian version of the Crow or something to that effect. Um, that was that was interesting. But it wasn't gothic. The Crow is a gothic character. You know, a lot of it is religious symbolism. A lot of it is the emotion. So it's like all of the different genres of like I talk about rock music, the grunge scene, the drug scene of the '80s with guys doing heroin and crack and all this kind of stuff, and all of that being dumped into this quintessentially '80s and early '90s, because the series ended in 1992. It was started in like 1988, '89 or something, and it ended in '92. He was making this thing pretty much by himself, which is what you know took so long for it to come out. But that's a lot of indie creators. It takes them forever to work through their thing. And because they don't know that these things are going to turn into franchises, they don't put a lot of effort into them, or they put all of the whatever they got into it, and then that's it. Which is what happened with Grendel. Same thing. Matt Wagner essentially put all of the Grendel stuff in the first Devil by the Deed, um, and didn't believe that there was going to be a franchise out of it. And then when it became a franchise, okay, well, it just had legs of its own. Now there's robot Grendels and all this kind of stuff. So the Crow, it does suffer from that. It suffers from the fact that James O'Barr was kind of like, hey, I'm working through the death of my girlfriend here, but people are willing to want to turn this thing into a movie, and this thing's incredibly popular. What the hell do I do? Just create other crows, I guess. But you can't recreate the emotion and the attitude and the feeling of what you were working on. Like he's not gonna, have another girlfriend die, which is why I'm pretty sure he probably worked on some of the subsequent ones, but ended up giving it up and selling it. You know, like what can you do really? Um, so it was WG Phil says he been feeling horrible the past night, and it's nice to have a let me up. Good job. I knew that um, AEW was boring me. I was going to start the stream at 9 o'clock, but I had to search for my issue of The Crow. So I had to. It took me a while, and I was like, I'm gonna start at 10. I hadn't really thought about going and getting my other Crow books from out of my box. But again, there'll probably be other streams on The Crow too. And this is going to take place of our Sunday stream because I'm going to be watching WWE biographies. So just slide that on in there. I'm gonna try to start doing them probably on Saturday nights when now that biographies is on, and either I'm gonna do them early or I'm gonna do them on Saturday night. Um, WrestleMania is gonna be a disaster. It's probably not gonna be a stream at all at that point. So back to The Crow. I don't have a problem with the trailer. It seems to work out fine, but then again, it's a short version of the movie. Maybe the movie will be boring. Maybe it'll suck. Maybe by the time the movie comes out, I won't be as positive on it. But right now, I'm looking at it and saying, I don't see the problem. I understand why everybody, is kind of tired of these very skinny, not very muscular, not very tough looking guys. But in this instance, it doesn't fit who Eric Draven is. I don't know who the character is going to be. I don't know if he's going to be a musician in this one. Hopefully he is. That would explain why his body looks the way it does. He's also a ghost. Well, not technically a ghost, but he's undead. But that's also another interesting thing that Eric Draven has no special skills. Like he's not like really good with a gun or anything like that. He's a musician. But because he can't be killed, he can take a lot of damage. And you can shoot him 100 times, you can, blow him up or whatever. He's just gonna keep coming back. And that's the wonderful thing about the book is that you watch Eric taunt these guys, and there's a scene in the book where he allows them. He just stands in front of all the gangbangers and lets them shoot him, and they fire on him, and they just put all kinds of holes in him. He's just standing there letting it happen, and you can see the bullets just tearing through him and just hitting like pop, 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 pop. But there's no sound effects, so you just have to look at the art, and it's beautiful art, by the way. It's very creepy. You look at Eric's limbs and everything; he's very sinewy. It's stylized, so it's not in any way human. But then again, he's not really a human character anymore, anyway. And you see him getting shot, and his body is covered in smoke. And then he just goes about his business after they shot him with shotguns and handguns and everything else. And he's just still standing. He just goes about his business and starts killing these fucking guys, and it's fucking cool. All right, like it's literally that cool. Um, and he's saying these things to these guys. He says, "This society, absolved, consecrated, sanctified, possessed of the devil, like a flood of black crows in the fibers of his internal tree, submerged him in a last swell, and taking his place, killed him." What the fuck is he talking about? Like, he's just it's nonsense. He says, "Oh, you sewer rats are so faithful. You cause me to blush to my bones. You never stop dying for me." As he's going through killing these guys with his bare hands. He didn't have a gun at this point. He was just going through killing these fucking guys. And of course, you get the famous scene where T-Bird's running away, and everybody's trying to get the hell out of there. People are shooting him in the head, for God's sake. Um, but it's a great story. But he's not Rambo, so I don't understand why everybody is so upset about the look of it. I understand why you don't want it remade, especially updated for modern audiences. I'm not a fan of that myself. I don't like I only like the sound of that, but I'm cool with it. I want to see how it's going to turn out. Maybe I'm just a big fan of the franchise, and I'm glad to see Eric being revisited. Um, I haven't been a big fan of the other versions of the Crow though. I think the one that I was talking about before, I'll have to go through and look at my comics about it. But I'll have to read that one again because I really don't remember that much about it. I do remember City of Angels. It involved strippers and all this kind of stuff too. I think it has some BDSM in it too. It's like really weird stuff. There was another one. I think it was a Native American Crow. I don't remember what that one was called, but I think him and his people have been killed so the land could be taken from them. And then of course he had to resurrect to come back, take the land back. Uh, like I said, there's been so many because it's bounced around so much. It went from being an indie comic that Obar was doing pretty much by himself to other people doing it. And he ended up, I believe, selling the property to somebody else. And then IDW has been printing a lot of Crow comics, but James Obar has not written any of them, as far as I know. I don't even know if this guy's still alive, if we're being honest. I think he might be. He probably is. But I don't think he's that involved in the franchise. He's not like Seth MacFarlane with Spawn, Like Seth MacFarlane is hands on with Spawn. He's hand picking the artists. He's writing the issues. Um, he's trying to put together the movie. It still ain't came out. It's like 10 years of that. Same thing with Hellboy. Like a lot of the indie comics, the creators are typically very hands on. I haven't read Hellboy, by the way. I know a lot of people think like, Ango, you probably read Hellboy. I have not. I have not read Hellboy. I don't like the art style. I hate to break it to you. I don't like the art style. But Hellboy is pretty cool. I like the first two movies. The ones where they did from the original series. The most recent movie, wasn't a big fan of that. Was not a big fan of that. So I'm tepid when it comes to reboots, especially when they're supposed to be updated for modern audiences. Um, yes, they race swapped Shelley. Shelley is going to be played by a black actress now, a black British actress. I know people don't like that idea. I don't think it matters that much because Shelley gets murdered and pretty much at the beginning of the movie, and then you don't see much of her after that, unless it's in the flashbacks. But then again, we don't know what they're going to do. It might be a situation where she's in the movie more than we think, and it also might be a thing where they put a lot of emphasis on them being alive first, and then they get killed, and then they get brought back. Which in the movie, the original movie, they're killed within 10 minutes, and then the rest of the movie is Eric getting his revenge, which was what made it dope. We didn't have to sit around here and waste too much time. I wish they'd have did that with like Ghost Rider or something, right? But as long as they do that, as long as they keep it stick as closely to the comic as possible, stick as closely to the Brandon Lee version of the movie as possible. You don't have to make a scene by scene remake of any of this stuff. You could put your own spin on it. You can recreate the villains because the villains are empty. They don't matter. So if you want to make Shelley a member of the gang who runs away or whatever to kill, it doesn't fundamentally change the story really. It just adds a one or two more elements to Shelley. because they gender swapped, they race swapped her, and they're probably going to add a little bit more depth to her character by making her a gangbanger or something to that effect. But I'm patiently waiting to see what's going to end up happening. But what did you guys think? Did you guys like the trailer? Did you think that the trailer worked? I've seen a lot of people say they didn't like it. I've seen a lot of people say they didn't like it, and I understand. I really do. But on this one, I don't really care about about the race swapping, and the fact that they got a kind of skinny guy to play the crow is like it fits. You know, I don't have a problem with that. So unless you guys have got something you want to discuss, that's pretty much it for me. What is this stuck to my legs? I'll probably dig through my crates and try to find my other Crow series because now that I've talked about it, I kind of want to read it. Um, and so I guess we could also talk about Judge Dredd, but we'll probably do that next week because I actually have read more Dredd comics and watched the movies and everything. But if you guys are done, we got a short little stream out of this. Thank you guys for your time. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.